found that frequently single individuals have a whole other set of challenges that they need to face when doing their estate and long-term care planning. If there's a spouse, there are significant things that we can do to preserve assets. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, so many single people just don't have those same resources. And it's oftentimes
Mm-hmm.
a huge stress and a burden for them
Sure.
as they anticipate aging. Hopefully, they've met with a financial advisor or someone who's a little bit knowledgeable and
Mhm.
developed a budget and a plan to make their money last.
Welcome to the Answers for Elders radio show.
And welcome everyone to Answers for Elders Radio Network, heard across the USA on your favorite podcast channel, on radio, and on YouTube. Today we are again honored to have Andrea Lee from Legacy Estate Planning, and Andrea is an elder law and estate planning attorney. And we're talking today about singles. If you're not married, how do you plan ahead for your aging years as well as your long-term care needs? And so, Andrea, welcome to the show.
Suzanne, thank you so much for having me back. It's always such a pleasure to be able to meet with you and our entire audience who's out here listening to us and hopefully learning a little bit about our experiences in this area of aging, making decisions for people as they age. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy to be meeting with you again.
I'm so glad because, Andrea, here's the thing that especially I see this with singles. They think, oh, well, I don't have to take care of anybody except myself. I don't have to deal with this. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to think about getting older. Or maybe they find themselves in a situation where their spouse has passed and they are in a situation where they're having to make some changes in their life as a single person for the first time. And I'm sure that there's a lot of considerations, with that baby boomer or, even later, older, of how do we navigate that scenario and how is it different if you're not married?
Absolutely. It's not infrequent for me to have individuals walk into my office who are single,
Mhm.
whether it's they've been long-term singles, they're never married, or maybe their spouse has passed away and they're
Mhm.
just launching into this new life as an unmarried and no longer married individual. And they're just trying to navigate those changes that they are
Yeah.
experiencing.
Yeah.
And I have found that frequently single individuals have a whole other set of challenges that they need to face when doing their estate and long-term care planning. Not everyone, but most people have a spouse that they can rely on to be a good advocate for them. From an elder law estate planning perspective, if there's a spouse, there are significant things that we can do to preserve assets. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, so many single people just don't have those same resources. And it's oftentimes
Mhm.
a huge stress and a burden for them
Sure.
as they anticipate aging.
Yeah. And I can imagine too, just the emotional shift between, gee, I planned everything with my husband, and now my husband or wife is no longer with me. And now I have to redefine what that looks like. Now, there's probably a lot of scenarios where, especially I see it with spouses that have taken care of a loved one for a long time after a chronic illness. And then all of a sudden, they put their life on hold and then they end up with this house and with, after their spouse dies of, the dreams are that they once shared with that spouse is no longer there. So there's this emotional side, which is a difficult time emotionally to be dealing with the cut and dried things that you have to deal with to take care of business. But those things are necessary. I can certainly imagine, Andrea.
I think you're absolutely right. Not only is it a huge emotional shift, but it's not just a shift of that day to day. I have a partner who is here with me who I can talk to about little decisions that need to be made every day. Like what's for dinner?
Mhm.
What should we do today? Like that daily back and forth that you hopefully have with your spouse. But it's
Yeah.
also looking at that much bigger picture about as I'm anticipating the next 5, 10, 15 years of my life, and I know that changes are going to occur, there's a chance I'm aging, I might become incapacitated myself, and maybe that spouse took care of their spouse, and
Yeah.
they're just reflecting on the fact that they unfortunately won't have someone available to take
Mm-hmm.
care of them as they
Mm-hmm.
have done for their spouse for many, many
Sure,
years.
sure. And I would say that applies also to people that don't have adult children.
Mhm.
They may not have had, had children in their life, or they might be estranged from their children. Sadly, those things happen, certainly. And so there's a lot of scenarios where we're talking about here of how do, what are I guess, Andrea, the first question I'm going to ask you is, what are the first priorities someone should look at when they're single and in planning for aging?
That's a great question. And there's just so many conflicting priorities. It's hard to choose just one. But if I
Mhm,
was really put down to it, I would say the most important thing for an individual to do as they age or at any time, if they're single or married, is always making sure that they have their power of attorney documents in place. It
mhm,
and like you just said, I think one of the biggest challenges for single individuals, as well as for many individuals, it's choosing your agents.
mhm.
For many married couples, there's an easy default, which is, hey,
Yeah,
if I'm incapacitated, it's my spouse. And they feel comfortable they can rely on their spouse. And then once again, like you said, if people have responsible adult children, the logical backup to the spouse are those adult children.
absolutely.
But there is a huge segment of the population who are unmarried and maybe they don't have adult children, or maybe they have adult children, but they don't have responsible adult children, or,
Sure, sure.
they don't have adult children who they are particularly close to or who they think could act as an appropriate agent.
Mhm.
And then for those individuals, I have found that to be one of the most daunting decisions that they have to overcome. And it
Right.
actually frequently creates a barrier to them even creating a plan or starting the process.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure, when you're talking about this whole thing of, the paperwork, who do you, it's who do you trust? Who knows your values? And who understands, and then I'm sure having those conversations with this person saying, will you be my, executor? Will you be my power of attorney? Will you, be my financial? They don't necessarily have to be the same individuals, certainly. A matter of fact, I know that Steve Waltar has talked about sometimes it's a good idea to have separate people for certain things. So in that case, but it's, I guess, who do you look for if you're single and in that regard?
Well, like you just said, people frequently divide up some of the responsibilities. So it's not
Mhm.
unusual for a client to say to me, my niece is a nurse and I'm close to her and she knows my values. So I do want to name her to make medical decisions on my
Mhm.
behalf if I become incapacitated.
Right.
But maybe they don't feel like that niece is in a good position to manage their finances. Like
Mhm.
maybe the single individual has, a very large estate and they don't have anyone who's sophisticated enough to manage multi-million dollars of assets. And they might not have close family members who can serve that role. So
Right.
if people really don't have, like I do encourage people, turn to close friends or close family members if you have people that you
Mhm.
are very close to, who are
Mhm.
responsible and who you think can do a good job of managing your affairs for you.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
when people truly don't have anyone, if they don't have good options, there are professional fiduciaries who
Mhm.
can step in and who can act as healthcare power of attorneys, even, or financial power
Mhm.
of attorneys, or executors can step into those roles if you don't have anyone who can serve that
Right,
role.
right. And that's the thing I think that, again, these are resources that people may not think about
Mhm.
because a fiduciary, you can find a good one either through you. I'm sure you know several, But also, there's other options. I know that, my husband and I just we kind of went through, who were the people. I realized even as a married person, I realized that he's not good in a crisis. And if something happened to me, he would he would just shut down. I mean, he's not that person. And so I decided, told him, I said, if something happens to me, I want you to be my joint. I want you to be joint with my friend Eric.
Yeah.
And that was what I decided. And he was okay with that. Matter of fact, I think he was relieved. I said, he's in the industry. He knows seniors. He knows what the resources are, and you don't have to worry about those things. And so I think that was the really thing that was really powerful is we can have people, more than one. We can certainly have a joint type of situation, and we can work together collaboratively, if for a single person who may not have adult children, which I do not have any children personally, that gives, that individual the ability to make certain choices. It doesn't have to fall on a certain person. And I think that's really important. So what about financially? Obviously, there's Social Security benefits. There's things like that that may be affected if someone, obviously doesn't have a spouse's Social Security to rely on, things like that. How does that affect a single individual?
Well, I mean, obviously, single individuals, assuming you've paid into the system and you're of age, are
Mm,
eligible for Social Security benefits just as, married couples
right,
are.
right,
Now, if you're a married couple and one spouse dies, typically the surviving spouse is entitled to the higher of the two benefits.
correct.
So if my Social Security was less than my husband passes away, then my Social Security benefit would typically increase to my husband's benefit,
Right,
is what we
right.
typically would see for Social Security. And then obviously people have spent the time and the energy planning ahead. I mean,
Mm-hmm,
nobody should be surprised with the idea that they're going to retire. Hopefully
mm-hmm,
everybody's looking forward to it and
right.
working hard to save money so that you can have a comfortable retirement.
Mm-hmm,
So I do think hopefully people are planning ahead. Hopefully they've met with a financial advisor or someone who's a little bit knowledgeable and
mm-hmm.
developed a budget and a plan to make their money last.
Yeah, yeah,
I do recommend people plan to live to 100. Um, I think that that's a pretty, not many of us make it, but some do.
yeah.
So it's better to plan for it. But for single people, especially if they are concerned about long-term care,
Mm-hmm,
I do get that phone call frequently where somebody is saying, I have adequate resources to pay for healthy retirement, but I'm concerned about unhealthy retirement.
yeah.
I'm concerned about the stroke. I'm concerned about dementia. I'm concerned about ALS or any type of.
Those are very, very important questions to address. Very important.
Absolutely. And the reality is, I think from other segments, if you're a married couple and one of you becomes incapacitated, we can preserve a lot of those monies. We can save
Mhm.
your house. We could save a significant amount of money. If there's a spouse. For single people, unfortunately, there are not as many good options if you're
No,
facing incapacity and needing long-term care.
no.
So, you'd asked me earlier, what's the priority? And it's definitely putting in place that financial power of attorney, putting in place that healthcare power of attorney.
Mhm.
But I would say it's also being much more conscientious about planning for the future incapacity and ensuring you have adequate resources and adequate plans
Mhm.
to pay for that.
Yeah, yeah.
So if people are single, they have adequate resources, we want to look at long-term care insurance. Is that a
Mhm.
viable option for you? It's important, it's essential to have a housing plan in place. It's
Mhm.
essential to sit down and say, if I become incapacitated, what do I want that to look like from a practical standpoint? Because you might not have a spouse to step in and make those decisions for you. So
No.
it's just
Or you don't have a spouse to take care of you in a situation where you're still at home.
100%, and you don't have that person there. And so the question
Yeah.
is, hey, can someone take care of me at home? Do I have the resources to hire someone if I don't have family members who can step in? And if
Yeah.
neither of those are true, what are the alternatives that I would feel comfortable with?
Yeah.
So the beauty is there are a lot of options available to single people, but don't wait to plan. Sit down with an estate planning or an elder law attorney, sit down with your family members and have that hard conversation about what can people do for you? What are their boundaries? And then just put in place a plan that fits your own needs. It might be
Fabulous.
exploring alternative living facilities on your own before you need it. It might be preparing irrevocable trust to preserve assets, because you can do that when you're single. You can create
Sure.
those special needs trusts we talked about, but you need to do them much further in advance than you
Right.
might have to consider if you were a
Right.
married
Right.
individual.
Andrea Lee, estate planning and elder law attorney from Legacy Estate Planning in Bellevue, Washington. Thank you, Andrea. It's so great to talk about this issue and so important.
All right, thank you, Suzanne, and I hope to see you again soon.
Did you know that you can discover hundreds of podcasts in our library on senior care? So visit our website and discover our decision guides that will help you also navigate decision making. Find us at answersforelders.com.